Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron,
And I'm Brett.
and you're listening to The Last Alliance, a Rings of Power podcast.
We know it's a dangerous business going out your door, or when choosing a podcast, but we're glad you've joined our adventure as we discuss The Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power.
And so it begins.
All right, welcome back to The Last Alliance. Getting ready here for season 2. We saw the trailer and the behind the scenes, and I think we're pretty excited, right, Brett?
Yeah, I think I kept YouTube in business for the week when the trailer came out. Matt and I watched it on repeat and like at 1/16th speed, probably 50 times the night it came out.
Yeah, there's just a lot packed into there, huh? Especially if you're us and are trying to eke out every detail of what's going on.
And that's the exciting thing. You know that the producers know that there are people like that doing it. So there's a lot of strategy going into these trailers and even more misdirection, I'm sure.
For sure. Before we dive into kind of our teaser episode for season 2, we kind of want to break down. We're going to change things up just a little bit of what our initial intention was for season 2. I think what we're going to do for season 2 is we're going to have kind of like 2 different parts. If we haven't mentioned it already, this whole thing kind of got started during season 1 when Brett and I would watch an episode and then immediately call each other right after it aired to kind of talk about, well, what did you think about this? What did you think about this? Did you see that? That kind of thing, right? Like I'm sure most of you do. And what we've done with season 1 so far is kind of have a post hindsight 2020 type of perspective on each episode and kind of dive more in depth with each episode for season 1. And I think what we're going to do is for season 2 is kind of do both of those. So as episodes are coming out during season 2, we'll still do that kind of like phone call conversation episode as they come out, right? But then I think that we'll do a deeper dive, a better perspective analysis or commentary on each episode after the season is already complete, kind of later on in the year. But yeah, that's just a little change. So we're going to have basically part 1 and part 2 to these season 2 podcasts.
The thing that I enjoyed with our season 1 episodes is, like you said, having the perspective to look back and say, ooh, what did I miss the first time? Now knowing the fuller picture, what foreshadowing was going on, what symbols, what themes, what quotes were said that tease something that's going to come later. So I'm definitely looking forward to providing that same recap for season 2. But I think the instant reaction is going to be a lot of fun.
Exactly right. I think that we were both kind of impressed with that, actually. Hopefully you guys were too, but I think we were both kind of impressed of, how much you can get out of it knowing the end already from the beginning, So we definitely want to do that again, but we also want to be able to, provide you guys with some thoughts and comments as things are unfolding, semi-live.
Yep, and we'll be experiencing it live with all of you. So with that, yep. Stilson, the trailers finally come. We have a date, August 29th. Episode 1's coming out. And we've got about 2 minutes and 45 seconds worth of official video to dissect until then.
Yeah, so speaking of, it's a bit earlier than I thought it would be, right? Like earlier in the year. I was not expecting it in August.
No.
When it, got announced. I thought it would be more towards the end of the year.
I was waiting for like a November Thanksgiving Day type of thing, but no, just a
Right.
couple months out.
Which is awesome.
I'll take
So,
it.
yeah, you want to dive in? We're gonna kind of go. Brett and I made a bunch of notes on the trailer and the behind the scenes footage from what Amazon Prime has released. So we're gonna just kind of go kind of rapid fire. So Brett, if you want to start us off.
Yep, we'll start in the most logical place. The first shot of the trailer is who the series is all about, and that's the big bad Sauron. We get a glimpse of him. He's looking a little beat up, to be honest. And we hear a quote from Durin saying, "An evil, ancient, and powerful has returned." Who's he talking about, Stilson? Or what is he talking about?
Bum. Well, that's the thing. Is it the Balrog or is it Sauron? There's kind of a double entendre there. And I think in the context, he's probably talking about the Balrog, but it was a great line to put on the trailer because it could apply to exactly what you're saying. Who is it?
Yeah. Is this Balrog that got teased to us in the first season, and maybe we're seeing some of its havoc wreaking going on later in the trailer? Is this the same Balrog that we see in the Fellowship of the Ring? And is this the same destruction that the Fellowship stumbles upon supposedly thousands of years later?
So that's kind of what I was wondering too, is I was like, are they already in season 2, gonna show the destruction of Khazad-dûm? Because that's pretty epic. Like, we're already here. And it definitely looks like at least parts of a dwarven kingdom somewhere are getting destroyed in the trailer, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of think it is. I also, that Balrog has been there for who knows how long, since Morgoth died or whatever, So I'd assume that he probably is just taking up residence in that mountain.
I think it could be. It would be a real stretch of the timeline because Gimli in the Fellowship seems to have been to his cousin Balin's place in Moria just recently and seems pretty shocked to get there and find that things have been run over. But I do think it could still be, I think it could be that Balrog, but I've got to think that the dwarves at least put up a fight. There's no way they're shutting down the Dwarven Kingdom in season 2.
Maybe it's not the Balrog. Maybe we're just throwing stuff out there, but I have to think that they wouldn't have, semi-introduced him last season if he wasn't going to do anything. That being said, maybe they find a way to, contain him for a while in this season, and he ends up breaking out of that containment later on, and that's what we see with Moria. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm not sure enough of the history there because I have not read those books. Like, as I said in last season, I've only read the Silmarillion, right?
Would it be a fair comment to say that the actual Tolkien timeline is helpful, but definitely not critical to understand for this?
Well, we're
series?
definitely going to see that they are not, zealots about keeping the Tolkien timeline as written or as intended with Anatar, I think, right? And we'll get to that in a minute. Who knows? Really, there's so much unknown, right? Who knows what Gimli was referring to of my cousin Balin will throw us a feast, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, he thought that they were still alive, but what does that mean to a dwarf? Like, I saw him 100 years ago, or, I heard about him when I was a child. I don't know exactly what Gimli meant by that. And the other thing is, and maybe you guys know better on this, but I don't really know. There's obviously a difference between Khazad-dûm and Moria. And I'm wondering if maybe, Khazad-dûm is destroyed. Are they able to contain him like on the Khazad-dûm side of the mountain, and on the Moria side of the mountain is still safe, or does Moria become what Khazad-dûm used to be? Kind of like Baghdad used to be Babylon or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's where we'll end up. So the dwarves are in trouble. It looks like the woodland realm folks are in trouble too. There's some gooey, kind of looks like Stranger Things. If you watch Stranger Things, kind of some gooey black poison monster crawling around everywhere. What on earth is that?
I had the same question. I have literally no idea. And I'm like, I don't even really know what storyline to tie it into. To me, it makes most sense to fall into the stranger side of the story. That it's, some crazy thing that they're experiencing on their way to Rune. But it also could be, tied to Sauron, maybe. Because he's obviously got magic. So who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. Yep. I wonder if we're going to be dabbling a lot more in things to do with the unseen world. That was something you brought up a lot during the season 1 episodes. We hear about it? Are we going to see more of that sorcery? And we definitely get some of that. We get a shot of some figure, looks like a female person with black fingernails, playing with the moths and disappearing in some underground tomb-like space. Is that one of the cultists? So are the moths good or bad? They seem to be good in the Peter Jackson films. Not starting off on the right foot in this series, though.
Who knows? Well, the Eagles seemed good in the Peter Jackson films as well, but there they are escorting Farazan, so who knows?
Yeah, everyone's succumbing to the darkness, it seems like.
Or the writers at Amazon Prime are unfaithful to Tolkien.
What? For me, the most exciting shot in the not the most exciting, but one that I know me and Matt rewound quite a bit, was the first fight scene. We've got Galadriel, we've got Elrond, a couple other to be identified warriors circled around and defending against, if you slow it down, some shadowy, glowy-eyed figures. It looked a lot like the scene at Weathertop in Fellowship of the Ring when the hobbits are being surrounded by the ring wraiths.
True. I have a prediction for that scene, actually. I think that one of the elves in that little circle might be Celeborn.
Celeborn, husband, presumed
To
dead by
Galadriel.
all except those who know anything about Celeborn. That was one of the more shocking bits of dialogue in the last season, was Galadriel dropping this line that Celeborn was dead. We all know that that's not true.
It can't be, right? Because we see him a 1,000 years or so later, so...
Unless that's actually Sauron.
Unless it's Sauron. Yeah, maybe they're gonna just rewrite the whole Lord of the Rings. Who knows?
Okay, we get back to Sauron. We've known him as Halbrand. He looks like Halbrand, but we see him dressed up. He got his hair done, got outfitted, and he's walking through what looks like the streets of Eregion, which we see later looks like a siege is going on. We know there's a siege of Eregion that turns out not so good for the elves. But we see Halbrand walking through, presumably in his Anatar form.
Do you want to dive into him and Anatar real quick, or was there...
Let's do it. I think we
I
need
feel
to
like
spend
it's
the
the
most time
biggest...
here.
Yeah, right? It's the biggest question mark and meat out of the preview, I feel like. So
I know one of my questions at the end of season 1, after watching it for the first time, was, well, darn, is the Halbrand character, meaning the actor, is he just done for because they've found him out? So it was exciting, one, to see him back, but two, he's finally assumed his Anatar form. And just a recap of Anatar. Anatar is who Tolkien writes about as the character that Sauron assumes, this sort of angel of light that appears to Celebrimbor. And deceives him, convinces him to forge the rings of power. It's the whole character that everyone was waiting to appear in season 1, but never did. But it looks like we are going to get him in season 2, and I think he looks every bit the part. He's much more cleaned up than Halbrand. He's got a haircut. His outfit looks good. He's shown up in this big ray of light. I know maybe you might think that's a little bit of overkill, but it seems like, okay, we're gonna finally see the Anatar story. But I do have a lot of questions about it still.
Yeah, right. So, and like we already mentioned, kind of they're out of order here, right? Because the 3 elven rings were the last of the ruling rings besides Sauron's ring to be made, right? So by the end of season 1, normally you would think Anatar has already done his job of, starting this whole idea of rings of power. They're working on the dwarves and the men, and they're moving into the elves portion, and it's kind of at that point the break of what you saw at the end of season 1. We need to separate this from Sauron, in season 1 it was from Halbrand, separate it from him. He can't have anything to do with their creation. Let's make 3 of them. That kind of stuff all holds true. And I think that because we thought that all of that stuff had already happened with the other rings up to that point, that we thought that any footage of Anatar that we would see in season 2 would be a flashback, right? Because chronologically it happened before what we saw in season 1. However, the preview, it doesn't explicitly say that it's not a flashback, but it kind of, from what I'm seeing at least, looks like it's not a flashback. And when you think about it, it kind of makes sense that it's not a flashback, because as you're watching season 1, the idea of, rings of power is fairly new, it seems like. It hasn't dawned on them to make a ring
Something
yet.
small, circular form.
Exactly. And you would think that if they'd already been making a bunch of these from Anatar's, inspiration for the dwarves and the men, that it would have been like, well, why don't we just make a ring like we are for everyone else?
Yeah. Yep. I think that does put it to bed that in this retelling of the story, Anatar comes after Halbrand. So that brings me to my big question then. How on earth does this Anatar character, who looks just like Halbrand, weasel his way back into Celebrimbor's good graces? In the behind-the-scenes footage, he tells Galadriel, "I've had a very unexpected visitor show up," and
the
how
thing
does he
is,
get back in?
Yeah, the thing is, and the thing that's so stupid, in my opinion, is, okay, first of all, I can go along with he looks just like Halbrand, because it's just saying use your imagination a little bit. I'm okay with that. But it still wants to show us that it's the same person, right?
So you're saying Celebrimbor doesn't see that face?
Right. So it wants to show us, the audience, that it's the same person, but also be able to use our imagination that the people there can't tell, right? And I'm okay with that.
Fair enough. Yep, I'll buy it.
I'm okay with that. The part that I have a hard time with is they just continue to make, and maybe he is this way, but I didn't get this impression. They continue to paint Celebrimbor as this complete oaf. Just stupid,
Starstruck,
yeah,
buffoon.
Yeah, like some of the dwarves in The Hobbit are more cunning than Celebrimbor is made out to be in this show.
What's
and it's
an
like,
alloy?
It's like, how is that possible? He is the lead elven smith for all of the Eldar, at least the ones living in Middle Earth. And you're telling me he rose to that height and stature because of his good looks? Or, anyway. So when you see the scene of Anatar just emerging from this glowing furnace, you're like, they're painting it out that Celebrimbor has just witnessed the coming of the Messiah and is buying it, lock, stock, and barrel. And it's like, where's some skepticism? Where's some questioning attitude here? How is this elf coming out of the furnace, and why is it glowing, and who is this guy even, and why should we trust him? The only thing I can think of is that he tries to paint some picture that the Valar sent him.
That's I see that as very plausible. Hence the grand entrance, right?
And the gift, right? The Lord of Gifts.
Yes. Which they teased in the final episode of season 1.
Exactly.
Which I thought, okay, if you're not doing Anatar, thank you at least for the reference. Oh, you are doing Anatar. So are you going to just rehash that line again?
Well, and if they're doing Anatar, didn't he also show up in disguise to the Númenóreans? So are they going to do some weird character for them as well?
Yeah. To be fair, if I may be fair to Brimby, it
To be
does
fair.
look like, and I predict it'll be near the end of season 2, but we do get a shot of Celebrimbor, what looks like, in my opinion, trying to throw some rings back into the furnace, and he looks pretty beat up, pretty scuffed up. If you pause the video at one shot of him kind of in the distance with some bodyguard looking guys, looks like his hand is either cut off or very brutally maimed. Looks like he figured out what he was dealing with probably a little too late, though.
Yes.
Right before Anatar snaps the necks of everybody who raises a sword against him. So
Right,
there's going to be
and-
a big showdown. Which
And
I'm
we
excited
know
to see.
we know the ending fate of Celebrimbor, right? So at some point he's going to be taken prisoner and then strung up.
Yes. Sorry, Brimby.
That is if they stick to the Tolkien script, which in some ways they are not. So who knows?
Yeah. We'll leave that for Anatar. We're looking forward to it. Let's just rapid fire through some of the other interesting points we noticed. The trailer threw some text on the screen that on August 29th, when it comes out, said, "Darkness will bind them," which is nearly an exact quote from the One Ring poem, where it says, "One ring to rule them all, and in the darkness bind them." So a pretty direct reference to actually the One Ring. Do we think we see the One Ring in this season? Or the concept of the One Ring?
Maybe the concept. I don't know if they are going to reveal the actually create the ring this season. But maybe. My bet is season 3, but who knows?
Fair enough. Fair enough. I think if they're feeling any sort of pressure that they've got to increase viewers, maybe we do see it earlier.
True.
They expected.
True. So something I thought was interesting is Elrond is out there wielding swords in a couple of the scenes. So finally kind of abandoning his diplomat status and heading into battle.
And I think it looks good on him. It makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, obviously you see what I assume to be a siege of Eregion in the trailer. So I think that the one scene where he's, more armored up is probably for that siege. Obviously, the other scene when he's with Galadriel, I still don't know if that scene is a flashback or not. TBD. But if it's not, I'd be interested to know what they're out looking for. Did they, get just a hunting party for Sauron after the fact, after he left, or I don't know. So we'll see what happens. But it looks like Eregion is getting attacked. At least that's my prediction. So as you noted last season, Adar, the man who plays Adar, is not with us in season 2. I thought they made a good replacement of him, though. And I guess it made it easy with how dressed up they have to make him with all of the, makeup and the scars and the ears and the hair and everything. So, but I thought he looked pretty good. The replacement character.
Yeah, and here's my prediction. It may be brief, but I think we will see back, or what's it called? Flashback.
Yeah,
I think we will see a brief flashback because there's just way too much story there.
between him and Sauron.
Between Adar and Sauron. Yep.
Yeah, and let me ask you this question, because it's one that I've had, is do you think that Sauron is going to kill Adar, or do you think that he is going to lull him into a partnership?
Oh man, I'm gonna say I think he's gonna kill him this season. There was a lot of fiery hatred in Halbrand's eyes in last season, and
So
he almost did kill him.
that's what I thought initially as well. However, when you think about it, that's not always the Sauron way. He's usually able to temper his anger very well and think of a course that involves manipulation before he resorts to a course of just brute strength. I'm taking what is mine.
That would be a bold prediction, and I would give you all the props if Adar is still alive at the end of season 2.
Well,
that would be quite.
I don't know if he's going to be alive at the end of season 2, because I do think that Sauron is ultimately going to find a way to kill him. But I think initially to, not have the orcs resent him.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to just walk up and kill their father.
That's a tremendous point. They love their Lord Father. Very good. The stranger makes an appearance. We almost forgot about him. He's working on his "You Shall Not Pass" dance moves with the stick.
Mm-hmm.
My big question is, are they ever going to confirm whether this is Gandalf? Or are they going to keep playing this little game? And they're just going to drag it out?
I think that
they've got to somehow confirm it.
Yeah, I think to try and keep playing the game at this point is pretty futile, because everyone who has any exposure to the Lord of the Rings at this point knows that, or at least has great suspicion that is Gandalf.
What if this character is not Gandalf? Well, I'll answer that. I'm quitting the show.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that there would be too much of an angry backlash from the fans at this point, because you have, and I think I mentioned this in one of the season 1 episodes, but at this point you have attached to the stranger too many of what would be considered semi-sacred Gandalf traits and characteristics.
And quotes,
right? So I think that there would be more of an angry, backlash from the fans.
Yeah, and since we know that Amazon is listening to us, don't do it. Don't do it.
Exactly. Oh, there was that one scene where, all of a sudden there's like a tower fortress looking thing that pops out of nowhere.
It's the last thing we see.
Yes. So what are your thoughts on what that is? Is it a flashback? Is it...
I'll tell you what I think it's not. I don't think it's the fortress that we saw at the beginning of season 1, because that was Morgoth's fortress that Sauron kind of overtook. So I don't think we're seeing a flashback creation of that.
Okay.
I'll tell you what I think it might be. I think it possibly could be the fortress in Mordor, which seems a little odd because we're going from volcano to ice. But we're certainly playing a lot with this idea, and I think you mentioned it too, that evil equals freezing ice cold, no warmth. And I was rereading parts of the books, and in The Return of the King, when Frodo and Sam are marching through the plains of Gorgoroth to Mount Doom, one of the things that they're struggling with is how cold it is.
Oh, interesting.
It's a cold wasteland. So maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I thought that it might be that fortress that we see early on in season 1, and we're seeing a flashback. I do, as you said, it is a fortress that was used when Morgoth was still, El Jefe of the bad guys. But that doesn't mean that Sauron couldn't have been the one to make it for him,
Interesting.
And it like you said, it kind of jives more with the freezing tundra scene of the fortress up in the north rather than Mordor, because we've already seen Mordor, right, in The Lord of the Rings, and it wasn't icy. But like you said, it definitely, they are definitely making a point, right, to tie this element of heat and cold to different types of magic.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of appreciating the direction they're trying to expand the knowledge of magic, it seems like, in this series, and I'm appreciative of that. That's I'm excited to see where they end up taking us. But okay, let me ask you this. We see in the preview Disa saying brace yourself, and then there's some kind of a crash. Are we witnessing an assassination attempt?
An assassination attempt on who? Disa?
No. That Disa orchestrated to kill her father-in-law.
Ooh. Man,
'Cause
I'm
she's-
excited to see what Disa does.
It looks like she's telling her husband to brace himself, like she knows there's a crash coming and no one else is really aware. And then there is some kind of a crash or explosion or something. And I'm just saying, I don't know if we're watching an assassination attempt. We'll see.
I'm excited to see how evil Disa can get, because I was thoroughly impressed with the chills I got seeing her talk about overthrowing her father-in-law in the last season. And that's where we left her, right?
I think my last question is, we see, again, no surprise, Isildur is alive. Yeah, what do you
Literally.
think? What do you think he's up to? It looks like he's almost in. Is that spider's name Shelob? Shelob's lair? It kind of looks like that's where he's at.
And we might need some research help, Matt, but is Shelob around in the Second Age? Or are we dealing with Shelob's
On Goliath?
progenitor, Ungoliant?
It's definitely not Ungoliant, because I'm pretty sure Ungoliant dies. According to the Silmarillion, Ungoliant's hunger drove her to devour herself.
And when did that happen?
It just says sometime in the Silmarillion.
So I guess we'll see what happens there. But
yeah, he's hanging out with Arondir. Yeah, what are they getting up to? I have to keep reminding myself, this is the character that is going to be responsible for killing Sauron. It seems like there needs to be a hastening in the character development to get this kid to a mighty warrior status who's going to go hand to hand with Sauron, finger to finger, as it were.
We have at least 4 more seasons, right? Including this one. So
true.
There's time. My last question for you, Brett, is when, where, and who is making a Lord of the Rings theme park? Because it is high time.
There's been a Lord of the Rings moment, it feels like, in the last 5 years in pop culture, right? Lots of memes, lots of GIFs, a resurgence in the movie's popularity. I'm all for it. I'll tell you where it is right now. It is in New Zealand. Matt and I got to go to Hobbiton.
Hobbiton, yeah.
And I tell people all the time, I believe that there are sacred places on Earth. This one's right
That's
up there.
one of them.
This is one of them. It is the most amazing piece of land in the world. And that set is just immaculately kept and magical in every way. And the
That's
second
pretty cool.
breakfast was tremendous.
I'll have to go check it out. But yeah, like as I was watching this, I'm thinking of like, Harry Potter World and the Star Wars land at Disneyland and Disney World, and those places are awesome for people who are fans of that. And I'm like, Lord of the Rings, if someone were to actually do something like that for Lord of the Rings in the States, it'd be huge.
So
Huge.
what ride are you riding? Getting in line for half a dozen times on your first
Prob-
day in Lord of the Rings land.
Hopefully they make something with the Eagles. Maybe we're running from a Balrog in Moria. I don't know.
I'm picturing you got Star Tours, kind of this virtual ride in a ship where you're going through 3D scenery. I'm picturing something like that on this cavalry of horses charging Minas Tirith.
I like it. Soaring over Middle Earth.
Soaring over Middle Earth.
With the Eagles, Brett? Come on. All right, we digress. Anyway, is there anything else you want to talk about for the previews that we've seen so far? I think that was it for me.
No, maybe we should clear something up for those listening. I am going to do my very best to not read or seek out any spoiler material, only information that comes from the showrunners, Amazon itself.
Yes.
I'm going to try and keep my knowledge of what's coming strictly to that which is official.
Right, because honestly, there's a lot. When you dive into that, some of it could be true, right? But a lot of it could just get you off onto who knows what path. So
yeah,
we'll do the same.
So in the meantime, we'll see you all shortly after August 29th. Thanks for joining us. We look forward to spending the next several months talking about Season 2 of The Rings of Power.
Thank you for joining our fellowship on this episode of The Last Alliance, a Rings of Power podcast.
And if you enjoyed this episode even half as well as you should have liked, or liked half of it half as well as it deserved, please subscribe, comment, and share.
We'll see you next time.